In this week's material, we're going to continue on to learn more about style sheets and specifically focus on some advanced features of style sheets. One of the things that will happen as we get into some of the more advanced features is we're going to find some things we want to do work in certain browsers and they won't work in other browsers. This means that we have to keep this in mind as we're looking at developing the pages. In this week's material, you'll be introduced to some new terms such as graceful degradation, meaning the ability for style sheets to gracefully work on older browsers that don't have the latest capabilities. Also, you'll be introduced to progressive enhancement, the idea that even if not all browsers will allow you to take advantage of a new feature, you'll be able to build your code in such a way where the browsers that do allow these new features will let your users see these more advanced things. I'm going to go ahead and start on page 212 and your first exercise, and I'm going to assume that you've already done steps 1, 2, and 3. And then we're going to go ahead and go into step 4 where we talk about using one of the pseudo-elements. And you can take a look at the chart on page 213 that shows some of the pseudo-elements. The first pseudo-element we're going to demonstrate is the first line element. And what that's going to do is apply a specific set of rules to the entire first line. Let's go to the style sheet. And you're asked to create a new selector, and the selector is going to be main text. Then we're going to put the colon in. The colon is an indicator of the pseudo element, and call it first line. And the one thing we want to do with that first line is make it all bold. So we're going to go font weight. Save the cascading style sheet, go back to the page, take a look at the way the first line is illustrated right now. The first 2 words are bold, the following words in the first line are all regular weight. Now when we look at the reloaded page, you'll notice that the entire first line is in a heavier text or in bold. Let's make sure we understand exactly what's happening there. I'm going to go back to the code for this page. And you notice how we have main text. We're saying the first line is what we're most interested in. And that's where we're going to apply the font weight of bold. If we go back to the source code for this page, we'll notice that there actually is an ID as part of a p tag called main text. And it's that full paragraph that's the main text of the page. And when we use the pseudocode first line, we're telling the browser to only apply that rule to the first line displayed in the context. Now we're going to go back to the style sheet and we're going to change that first line to a first letter pseudo element. The book suggests that you actually take the first line pseudo element that we had placed in the cascading style sheet and remove it. I just say let's edit it, and that's what I did here. I edited it from first letter or from first line to first letter, added the left float. It's going to allow the other text to wrap around this first letter that we're changing. Entered a specific font size, 3 units in this case, and entered a specific line height. Now let's go and take a look and see how this looks back in the browser. Pull it up, and you notice that no longer is the full first line set to bold. It's back to the first 2 words, the way the code was set up before we started this lesson. But this first letter is the big deal here, this big capital L. This has to do with the fact that we've increased the size and made text float around it. This is a good example of something you may want to go back to and just experiment a little bit. Let's take that first letter and instead of 3 units, just boost it up to 6 units, quite a bit larger there. We'll save and then we'll reload the page. and see how large this letter is. Of course, you're going to want to experiment anytime you're doing this type of large first letter in your text to see what looks reasonable. I'm going to go back to our cascading style sheet, bring that down to 3 units, more reasonable number. Save. Go back to the actual web page, reload the web page, and it looks pretty good, just like your book wants it to look, as seen on figure I3 on page 213. If you've completed this much of the exercise, you're ready to move on to the next one.